This is CNN Breaking News.
And welcome to The Lead. I'm Jim Sciutto in today for Jake Tapper, and we begin today with breaking news in Cleveland. We're watching for a news conference to begin any moment, addressing a grand jury's decision in the Tamir Rice case. We learned a short time ago that 2 police officers who shot and killed the 12-year-old will not face criminal charges. The young black boy who was holding what turned out to be a pellet gun. The prosecutor described what he called a perfect storm of human error, but the grand jury decided this afternoon not to indict those officers. Let's go straight now to that press conference in Cleveland. It appears it's about to start.
Everybody ready? Good, good. Well, as you already know, the grand jury came back with a no indictment in terms of the police officers involved in the Tamir Rice shooting. You know, this has been a long, troubling, trying year for not just the city of Cleveland, but particularly for the Rice family. And I know that they have been pushing for some closure in regards to the criminal side of this. But with this closure, know that the deep pain they must feel, even with the closure. So I want to say to the family, the mother in particular, that we're sorry for their loss, and we know that it's been a long process, but we do not intend to add to whatever anxiety or agony that they feel in terms of the process. We're concerned about due process. And now that the criminal side is over with, and there has been a determination in terms of the criminal side, we are now going to proceed with the administrative review of what happened, and that will come to the chief, and the chief will start immediately on that process. So I'm going to have the chief come up and really talk to you about that process in general, and then I'll close it out and we'll answer whatever questions you have. All right?
Thanks, Mayor. Well, as the mayor stated, this has been a troubling year, some trying times for the city of Cleveland. But I think that the people in the city have met these times and have stepped up for us and for this city, and have pushed for some positive changes that we're in the process of doing. And I think the citizens of this city need to be applauded for that. I think that we're continuing down that road to make sure that things get better in the city, day in and day out. And we don't do that alone. We do it with the assistance of the people in this city. As the mayor stated, now that the county grand jury has concluded, we start our administrative process in this matter with both the officers involved. We are going to reconvene our Critical Incident Review Committee. That committee will look at this incident from start to finish. That committee will also take a look at any and all information that's going to be provided to them by either the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Office, the grand jury, or the county prosecutor's office in their review of this incident. Once that's completed, the results of that review will be forwarded to my office, at which time I'll take a look at that, and then we will conclude this process. Now, what that conclusion looks like, none of us know, because this committee has to conduct that investigation, that review. And I don't want to speculate on how long that's going to take. As the mayor stated, this has been a long process already, and we don't want to drag it out unnecessarily, and we won't. This committee will get to work very shortly here. They will take a look at all the evidence. They will take a look at all the testimony, everything that's been put out there so far, and they will forward a recommendation to my office. At that time, we will start our administrative process. I want to, again, send our prayers out, not only to the Rice family, but to the city, and to let people know that we're here, that we're going to get through this again, as we've gotten through other things in the past, and this city will be better off for it. Thank you.
And I do want to emphasize that one of the things that we had been hearing for over this past year was whether or not there was a process or was there a due process. And we're not just going through a process. We are affording due process to everyone involved in this situation. And I believe that when we do that, and we do it in a fair and objective way, then we'll reach whatever conclusion comes out of that due process. But again, this has caused the city of Cleveland, with the loss of a child at the hands of a police officer, to do a lot of soul searching. And in the midst of that soul searching, we have made some changes, not only in terms of our policies, tactics, process, procedure, but we've reached an agreement with the Department of Justice in terms of the consent decree. All this is designed to better ensure that an incident like this would never happen again. Okay? So we'll take whatever questions you have. Yes?
Do you agree with the prosecutor beginning conclusion characterizing this as a perfect storm of human error?
Well, I cannot comment on that until the process is finished, because that automatically, when you say that, that automatically concludes something. We're going to go through a process. And you know, Prosecutor McGinty has drawn his conclusion based on the end of his process. At the end of our process, we will have a conclusion. And that conclusion, as I said, will deal with due process for everyone involved.
You have a legal background in a prosecutor, some experience in a prosecutor's office. I mean, do you agree this is the appropriate outcome or not?
I'm not going to comment on that. You know, again, you're asking me to comment and get, because whatever I say, you're going to draw a conclusion from that as to what, and when I say that and you draw the conclusion, then it has tainted our process. I'm not going to be having those kind of conversations, just as we haven't had them in the past. We're not going to have them now. Only thing I can assure you and the public and the Rice family, that this will not just be a process, this will be due process.
This is for the chief.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Chief, who makes up the review committee? And you said you don't want to drag this out, so what is the time frame that you're hoping to achieve this conclusion?
Well, again, I also commented that I don't want to put a time frame on it because the committee has a lot of work to do.
It starts right away?
Yes, it starts right away. And that committee is made up of members of the division. We also have members of the public, of the community that are on that committee. I can get you a full list of the committee members, but it's basically the same committee that was put together during the Brillo incident, the chase of November 29th. So we'll give you that list of people that are on it, but they have a system to go through to get through all the evidence, and they have to review that evidence, and then they have to make sure that they come to conclusions based on that evidence. And then that's presented to me, and then we go from there.
Are you pertaining to the discipline or potential discipline of the officers that were involved in the shooting?
All right, there is potential discipline if there's a violation of our policies, our procedures, yes.
Are Logan and Garback working in some cars and districts?
Both of the officers are and will remain on restricted duty. They've been on restricted duty since this incident happened. That's part of our process, not to allow officers involved in critical incidents to go back out there into the fray. They will remain on restricted duty until we complete the administrative process.
Chief, will there be any other state positions looked at besides these two officers during this review process?
We'll look at the incident from start to finish. Anybody that was involved, from our communications center to the officers themselves, to people involved afterwards, giving care, that kind of thing, we'll look at the incident from start to finish. Thank you.
Is the dispatcher, Constance Oliver, still employed?
I don't want to get this mixed up, but there's a
We've been
dispatcher
listening there
involved and
to
also
the
a call
Cleveland
taker.
Chief of Police,
And those are
Calvin
two
Williams,
separate
as well as the
functions.
Cleveland
One of
Mayor,
those persons
Frank
has
Jackson,
resigned
responding
from the city.
to the lack of charges against the
I
two
don't
police
wanna
officers
confuse
involved
them,
in the
so I don't
shooting of
wanna
the
give you
12-year-old Tamir Rice. They say that there will now be an administrative action carried out by the Cleveland Police Department. They say that that will not be something that they want to drag out, but the mayor promising there that there will be due process for those involved. I want to go straight now to the CNN correspondent, Jean Casares. She's been following this story from the beginning. Jean, no, it's early. It's only been a short time since this decision came out, announced by the prosecutor. From what you know and what you've seen, how did the grand jury decide in this case not to file charges against these officers?
Well, I think that critical, and we're going to show some of this in just a minute, is an enhanced video of the situation at the recreation center on November 2014, 1 year ago, when Tamir Rice was shot, when at 12 years old. But I think that the prosecutor said things that we had heard before, but confirmed with us, which really forms the state of mind of the officer. Let's listen.
It is likely that Tamir, whose size made him look much older and who had been warned that his pellet gun might get him into trouble that day, either intended to hand it over to the officers or show them it wasn't a real gun. But there was no way for the officers to know that.
And despite that, the dispatch, when they called saying there was an active shooter at that recreation center, did not say that it was possibly a juvenile, and did not say, as the original call that came in, that it was possibly a toy gun. So their state of mind was active shooter. Now, you're looking right there at some of the enhanced video that we saw for the first time today. And you can see the squad car has pulled up, and it was a matter of 10 seconds from pull-up to shooting, and actually just 2 seconds after he got out of the car, the officer, that the shot came. But what they really wanted to make apparent in this video today was that, first of all, the enhanced video shows Tamir Rice initially standing up and putting his hand into his waistband, as to be putting a gun away into the waistband, and then turning around and walking in an opposite direction, but turning and then coming toward the squad car. At that point, they say the video shows that the right hand of Tamir Rice was in the front of his body, and it moves back up to his waist, and you see his jacket then come up. And I think most importantly, they say that this gun, which was a toy gun, ultimately was found on the ground, which shows that the gun was out of his waistband when the officer shot Tamir Rice.
Gene, we heard when the prosecutor announced this decision, he acknowledged it was a difficult phone call, as of course you would expect with his family. How has the family responded publicly since the announcement? Well,
they issued a statement, and it has been so emotional. This was a 12-year-old little boy, really. And this is the statement that the family issued just minutes ago. They say Tamir's family is saddened and disappointed by this outcome, but not surprised. It has been clear for months now that the Cuyahoga County prosecutor, Timothy McGinty, was abusing and manipulating the grand jury process to orchestrate a vote against indictment.
Interesting to say they were not surprised by this. Disappointed but not surprised. Jean Casares, thanks very much on this. Joining me now, CNN law enforcement analyst Tom Fuentes, CNN political commentator Van Jones, and CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson. Joey, I want to start with you, if I can, take advantage of your legal experience here. We've seen, as you know, a lot of cases like this, police shootings. Seldom are the police officers charged. Of course, we're talking about a large variety of cases here. I don't want to get lost in that, but just can you explain to me, explain to our viewers, what is the legal standard required to be met by a prosecutor, by a grand jury, to issue charges in a police shooting? It is higher for officers of the law, of course, than it is for members of the public, but what is the legal standard they have to meet?
It is, Jim. What happens is, first, you get it to a grand jury, and that's been a big concern with this case because of the delay of time it took to get to the grand jury. Let's remind everyone that this happened in November of last year, 2014. A grand jury was just convened this October in the middle of the month to consider it. And so as an initial matter, the grand jury first, it considers A, is there reasonable cause to believe that a crime was committed, and B, did these officers commit it? And so what might constitute a crime? Whenever whenever the grand jury considers police instances, what they look at is what would a reasonable officer do in their position. Now, three things are considered. One, is there an immediacy of the threat that's posed to the officers or the general public? Number two, is the officer's response to that threat proportionate or not? And number three, as I mentioned before, the reasonableness of that activity. Now, it's not viewed by Monday morning quarterbacks. It's not viewed by the fact of hindsight and the benefits of it. The law recognizes and understands that they have a split second to make decisions. But I think, Jim, what happens, particularly in this case, and I think there'll be an evaluation of that throughout the country, is the process that's employed to get that information. Is the local prosecutor who works with police, who relies upon the police for investigative materials, who relies upon the police to make arrests, should they be the people who are ultimately really making that decision? And when I say that, we know there's a grand jury. But what we also know, Jim, is that the prosecutor essentially is the judge, the jury, and the executioner, controlling the flow of information, seeing what the grand jury hears, what they don't hear, what they consider and what they don't consider. Yes, grand jurors have subpoena power, but I can tell you as a former prosecutor that the manner in which you present the case has a lot to do with the final outcome in terms of what the grand jury ultimately concludes.
No questions. Prosecutors have a lot of power in this. Gene got to this earlier. Some of the key issues that came up were his size, the fact that he'd been warned earlier, Tom Fuentes, about carrying that pellet gun. But a lot of this information also was how it got to the officers. For instance, the dispatcher neglected to mention that the 911 caller said that the gunman was probably a juvenile and that the gun may not be real. So the cops, when you go to state of mind, they have that there's a guy there, they have a description of his clothing, etc., but they don't have that key information. You're a cop in those shoes. How essential is that?
Well, a couple things about that, Jim. You don't know, again, the officers have to go by what they're told by the dispatcher. Right. And you've already heard family members say that Tamir was large for his size. That means if he looked a little bit older than 12, 14, 15, well, there's other kids on the streets of Cleveland and all over this country gunning other kids down at that age with handguns. So that's number one. The size would really be irrelevant. And you have kids much smaller than that have killed other kids. Secondly, even if someone from the public tells you, I think it's a toy gun, I was a firearms instructor most of my 36 years in law enforcement. I could not have told you standing 5 feet away whether that was or wasn't a real gun. Looking at the pictures now, no one could tell you that. So somebody from 100 yards away phoning that in, how would they know?
And as you say, it's a split-second decision. Van, I want to ask you, that statement, that phrasing from the family statement struck me. They said they're disappointed but not surprised by this decision. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that they are, like many of us, this particular prosecutor went above and beyond the call of duty to orchestrate the exoneration of these officers. You've never seen a prosecutor go out, spend money to bring in experts to exonerate the police officers. They literally brought in experts. Usually what a prosecutor does, listen, if you think that this should go in front of a jury, you put the evidence forward, you move forward with a jury trial. To say that there's nothing happened here, nothing happened that should go to a jury. How about this? No medical aid after the kid is killed. How about criminal medical neglect? How about the fact that under ordinary circumstances, a police officer would never put themselves in peril and then shoot their way out? The fact that the police officer drove into peril and then shot his way out. There's not a traffic ticket you can issue. There's not a misdemeanor here. There's not one thing that happened here that could be charged. That is completely preposterous on its face. And yet, this prosecutor went above and beyond the call of duty to spend extra money and took extra time to get these cops off. Prosecutors do not act this way under ordinary circumstances. Usually, they throw the book at you and then they tell you, you explain to a judge and jury why you're innocent. This particular prosecutor did the opposite of most prosecutors in this case.
Well, now we have to see how the city of Cleveland reacts to this. Van Jones, Tom Fuentes, Joey Jackson, thanks very much for helping us through this. Also in the national lead today, twisters, floods, blizzards, violent storms making for a cruel and crushing end to 2015. That is across the U.S. More is on the way.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.